hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.
Welcome again to Straight Talk. My name is Ahmad Shakaraki, and on Straight Talk we deal with political, social, and economics here in Michigan, the U.S., and abroad. And tonight we got
Dennis Burnside,
Charles Thomas,
Paget Maynard.
Tonight we're gonna go back. We're gonna talk some about Malcolm and Dr. King, and I know lots of people out there don't want to hear the, we done passed that stage and everything, but Dr. King and Malcolm both said some things 50 years ago that's happening right now. So, Dennis, what do you think that Dr. King and Malcolm would think or could think about the thing that's happening now?
It's an interesting question. I think they'd both be surprised by some of the changes that you see in society, some of the superficial changes that you see in society, the lack of overt Jim Crow, the common phenomena that we see with interracial relationships, marriages, biracial children. I think the census report that just came out last week showed that the fastest growing demographic in the United States is of mixed race people. Mm-hmm. And I think they ought to put an asterisk there because in times past, there was a whole lot of mixed race people, but they always defined as black, right? Yeah. The one drop rule. But accepting that and looking at the number of people of Asian and Hispanic and African and European descent who are dating, marrying, and having children, or just having children, mm-hmm. is much more pronounced than it was ever in the past in the United States. And I think that some of the economic obstacles that were in place have been removed, but they've been replaced by a class type of barrier. Mm-hmm. So that if you come up and you get a good education somehow, mm-hmm. and you can manifest skills that are in demand, you will make a living that is comfortable. Mm-hmm. That's almost certain. But it's a matter of the obstacles in front of you based on the economic situation that you were born into, and yes, also the racial situation that you were born into. But on the other hand, I think Dr. King and Malcolm, I mean, Chuck and I have talked a bit about this on the show before, about how much they merged together, mm-hmm. to a common position towards the end of their lives. Mm-hmm. If you look at one of Dr. King's most important speeches of his early years, it was in 1963, I believe it was, where mm-hmm. he wrote a speech based on some letters he had written while he was in Birmingham, Alabama, protesting.
Yeah.
And it became known as a letter from a Birmingham jail.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at some of the things he talked about then, which was, of course, nonviolent participation, but it also criticized the middle class, comfortable, progressive white American demographic who pretty much gave lip service to the movement, but weren't willing to go out there and lay it all on the line and be as devoted to the cause as the words were. And then, of course, you had the dream, the speech everyone always quotes, which came a few months later. The Birmingham jail speech was in April, or the letters are written in April, and then the speech came out. And then, of course, the I Have a Dream was August that year.
Right.
You could see this appeal to the humanity of white Americans who have the power, still have the power, and like-minded allies to look at us as human beings who don't have the luxury of time anymore. We can't wait anymore.
Right.
We can't be patient anymore.
Right.
It's urgent now. Around that same time, however, and I don't mean to go on because I want everybody else to chime in, but I just want to set this up. Around that same time, a year later, not a year later, a few months later, Malcolm made, to me, my favorite speech by him was the Ballad of the Bullet. And in the Ballad of the Bullet, he talked about another thing Chuck talks about, economic independence. He said that if you take the dollar that you've earned out of your community and you spend it in the man who's suppressing his community, you not only make his community richer and richer, you make yours poor and poor, and you create a slum and a ghetto. He also talked about the fact that we need to start looking at our experience here in terms of not civil rights but human rights. And we ought to look at what we're experiencing here in terms of politics, Democratic, Republican, put that aside and start thinking as black nationalists, people who are looking out for what we can do for ourselves, by ourselves, and the importance of that. And then finally, I'll leave it here, in 1967, 1 year precisely to the day of his death, before the day of his death, April 4th, 1967. He died April 4th, 1968. King gave another seminal speech, and it was known, I call it the Out of Vietnam speech, where he gave this speech at Abyssinian Baptist Church, Adam Clayton Paul's church, an important site in the black experience in America. Everyone, if you ever get a chance to go to New York, go see this church, because there's a lot of history there. And at that speech, he called out the hypocrisy of the United States. And he talked about the disappointment of the lack of progress from 1963-64 to 1967 when he gave this speech. And he called out the United States as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And that what they were doing to the brown brothers and sisters in Vietnam could not be justified any more than what they did to the black brothers and sisters and the brown brothers and sisters here in America. And that it was time that we recognized that what we had been doing up to that point was good only to a certain extent. We had to make some new decisions. And of course, a year later, he was dead. So I think when I look back at both Martin and Malcolm, those two speeches out of Vietnam, which I always look at in the framework of Letter from a Birmingham Jail, because it really shows me the evolution of thought that Dr. King had. And then the 64 speech by Malcolm, where again, the Ballad of the Bullet speech, where he identified the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, the Dixiecrats and the Northern Democrats. He identified the hypocrisy of the Republican Party, who at that time had both a moderate, they're gone now, but the moderate and conservative wing, and how their false promises were just that. And it was time that we do for ourselves. So I think in a lot of ways, Malcolm might be pleased with some of the economic progress that some of us have made.
Yeah.
But if he looked at us en masse, he would be just as disappointed now as he was then. And I think the same thing would go for Dr. King.
Chuck, we see in 64 and 65 when Indiana, Mississippi, Tennessee, and all those southern states got a chance to vote. We see some things changed, but at the same time, lots of it didn't. So how do you see Malcolm and Dr. King?
Like Dennis saying, at one point they came together because I think Reverend King seen the benefits of the boycott.
Okay.
And, how it hurt them economically.
Yeah.
And he had a meeting with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and he went in depth as to economics and the development of economics.
Yep.
So it wasn't like they were enemies at the end. Like they came together and they had conversation, and they started working together.
Yeah.
And the speech that Dennis was referring to, shortly after that, that's when he had to go. They make a decision that he had to go, and one of his closest persons turned on him.
Yeah.
And he worked with the FBI on his assassination. And it's just, we have the same problem today. It's not a snitch thing. It's that black people don't think that they can make it on their own because we are dependent instead of independent.
Okay.
When you talk about independence, you got to talk about structure. And there's a reform that you have to go through. There's many ways to get to a certain place, but there's a lot of gates that you can go through, but you're getting to the same place.
Right. On your way to the same place.
Right. So even though you come in different doors, you're making progress. And we got to learn how to work together, and that's what King and Malcolm, if them two could come together, I'm quite sure, that leadership would thrive and flourish if people could come together like they came together.
Well, one of the things is that a lot of people right today, they want to say that Malcolm was way over here and Martin was there. They and like you were saying, they both was working for the same thing, but just different
doors.
Different doors and different angles. What do you say, Patrick?
Martin and Malcolm, two great men.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes we confuse things, because if I don't say it the way you say it, then I am opposing you. We have to look to see what the substance of what they're saying. And yes, even though they didn't come the same route, and you see, you can accomplish the same goal coming from different angles.
Oh, yeah.
Which is what? One might be looking at the social, one might be looking at the political, but they're dealing with the same issues we have. Talking about which, you mentioned just now, Chuck, about independence. We need to be independent. Yeah, it sounds good saying independent, but I prefer to hear interdependence. We got all kinds of people, black, brown, Caucasian, and whatever else between there. Dennis mentioned some of these different races, and we have a lot of mixture with these races. Now, if we take one against the other, we're creating problems. What we need to learn is how could all of us be working together for a set of goals that would be appropriate to the whole. If I want X and you want Y, and we're gonna argue over who should get this or which one is better, which one is right, man, you're not gonna get done in a hurry. The point is, nobody is prioritizing. Nobody is looking at what is best for the people. And I think when you look at King and listen to King, you see King was pretty much saying these are the things that are better suited for our nation.
Well,
Malcolm over here is saying, okay, we need to have these things, but we're going to have to get up and get it.
well,
We can't sit back and wait for it.
well. Go ahead.
It's like playing Monopoly.
Okay.
In order to be in the game of Monopoly, you got to have money.
Okay,
You got to buy hotels.
okay,
You know, you got to get on the Broadwalk. You got to start buying things, and that's what life is all about. You got to compete in the game, and once you compete in the game, you know, to me, you got to own property. You got to own. You have to have something that you can have an asset, just like in your economical family. You know, your house is an asset. You know, so and you got to raise your level of score and your level of economics, and you can run your family. You can live a comfortable life. You know, good education, good relationships with co-workers and whatever. Those are the things that it takes to spiral into a community, and those are the things that we're lacking. It's not that we don't have the money. It's not like we don't have the education or the know-how, but we just haven't channeled it properly. Everything we need, we got, but we got to get in the game of life collectively.
Yes.
This is what Malcolm and King were trying to approach.
How do you propose to do that now?
How do you propose to do that now? By being responsible in your community, by collectively doing things like in the Bible. Will a man rob God? Excuse me, Dennis. Will a man rob God? How does a man rob God? Through tithing. You got to have a storehouse.
Okay.
And if you don't have a storehouse, where you, by having your own business, that is a way that you can elevate yourself by treating your customers right. It's an exchange. But if you are treating people right in your business, the money will come. So when you got a community that's treating each other right, the blessings will come as you grow and expand.
Okay.
Dr. King said one time, if you get the hump out of your back, the man can't ride you.
Right, yeah.
Say that again.
If you get the hump out of your back, the man can't ride you.
Okay.
Dennis, what do you think now is the biggest hump in our backs?
It's a completely different economy. It's a completely different political situation now than it was in the 60s. So, for example, one of the things that Malcolm talked about in the Ballad of the Bullet was how through proper investment in proper management that the black community could build its economic base even higher. Because you have to remember, at this time, this was at the very end of Jim Crow. So most business that black people conducted was with other black people, right?
Yep, yeah.
And he was criticizing what he saw coming down the track with integration. He said, you run down the street because the white man's ice is colder, his water is wetter,
Yep.
and you spend your money with him instead of with us. And he saw that coming, but it hadn't happened yet.
Right.
So why was there still impoverishment? Why was there still lack of opportunity in education and employment, et cetera, the destitution that we still see? It had more to do with institutional racism, where a decision would be made based on whatever your qualifications are, whatever your attributes are. I'm not going to have them here because you've got the wrong skin color. But I do think that what he did not see coming, and what is the biggest problem today I see, is that we live in the age of multinational corporatism. We live in the age of the oligarch. We live in the age of huge, massive accumulation of wealth at the very upper scale of the economy, where you see the top 10th of 1% have as much money as the bottom 90%. That's way out of balance. So when he's talking about the example of how Woolworth built themselves up to become an economic power from a 5 and dime store to being
Yeah.
all over the world. Woolworth doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about several different examples that are obsolete now.
Yeah.
They have been competed out of existence. And I think the same problem that he identified as economic impediments exists, but they're in a whole different format, because at that time, when he gave that speech, right here in Lansing, there were black-owned nightclubs.
Yeah.
There were black-owned dry cleaners.
Yep.
There were black doctors who had black clientele. You had black
Clothing
legal
stores.
Yeah, you had it all.
Restaurants.
You had it right here. Why did they leave, and why did they leave en masse all across the country? Because we have a new economic paradigm coming in. So my thought on this is, you can't write out a prescription for a sickness that is no longer in place. We can do business with each other all we want to, and we can invest in each other all we want to, but if you can't compete enough to keep your doors open because it costs you $5 for a widget that Walmart's paying 15 cents for, you won't be in business long. Your customers aren't fools. They're going to say, why would I spend $5.85 here when I can get the same thing down the road at Walmart for $2? And it's just not black people. It's
Yeah.
people of all races.
Yeah.
So as long as you're living in this neo-colonial, neoconservative,
Racist.
worldwide oligarchical economic system, it's going to be real hard for us to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, except for educating ourselves on what the real issues are and how we got in this position. It's not the same as it was in '64.
Yeah. Dr. Lee Taylor said on the show that the government went through most of the black communities and put highways
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
destroyed what little businesses that we did have. She said that right here on the show.
That was by design, and you can
Yeah.
see that pattern repeated
In
from Detroit to Flint to Muskegon to Lansing, every city
And every
throughout
state.
the United States. Yeah, throughout the United States. But on the other hand, and we'll see how it works out, one of the key components of this new infrastructure bill that the Biden administration passed was recognition of the fact that the black economic basis was destroyed by these highways coming through. They acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And they said in this new infrastructure bill, we're going to address that economic segregation that was created by the modernization of the highway system. So we'll see.
What when King called for the boycott down in Georgia, what do you think they learned from that boycott? What do you think some of the things they learned from that boycott? What they could do with the boycott?
Yeah. They learned how to work together. I mean, everybody pooled their resources, and they did what they had to do to not participate in that system. They poked the bear. And they won. So
But what happening now? They did that then. What's going on now?
they're afraid
Did
to
they
poke the
just
bear.
change?
They're afraid to poke the bear.
Yeah.
The bear didn't got bigger.
What do you think, Dennis? What thoughts did Dr. King get from that? And now we don't see it because a few years ago, it don't work that way now.
Oh, economic boycotts still work.
Yeah.
You don't, Bill O'Reilly isn't on TV anymore because of economic boycotts. Sean Hannity almost lost his show because of economic boycotts. You still have the effect of taking people's foundation away, which is always based on the dollar, by opting not to participate in their wealth, and it has an effect. But again, we have to recognize the times that we live in, and the economy isn't structured the same way it was in the 60s.
Right,
It's
right.
just not that way anymore.
Right.
I can't leave here and say, I'm going to go to the black grocery store and support my brother. I'm going to go to the black peanut shop and support my sister. because they're not there anymore.
No.
I couldn't even go to Charlotte and say, you know what, I'm going to go support Cody's pharmacy, buy a business card. I'm sorry, buy a gift card and maybe an ice cream sundae, because it doesn't exist anymore. We're in the age of multinational corporate power. So we're going to have to tweak this thing a little bit more. So some of the prescriptions that they had back then just don't apply anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea that we all work together and invest in each other and give each other our dollar and we keep it within the community so it turns over 7, 8, 9 times like it used to pre-integration is well and good. But it's impossible to, well, I shouldn't say, it's damn near impossible to do that nowadays because the entire economic system has changed.
Yeah.
Pat,
I don't know. It takes, like, I think what Dennis said earlier about educating the people. And I like that thought. We are ignorant, uneducated, by and large, as a people, as to what's going on in life. So many of us are just concerned about, I have enough money to get this, and who don't care about this as long as they get, they wet the whistle, they're fine. But when are we going to get to the point that we can truly educate the populace? Now, the schools are not doing it, okay? So it's gonna take programs like this to sit down and really put out some meaningful education so that people, our people, everybody for that matter, can see something. Even those who are opposed to us right now, when they see that we have something, it might help to change their minds and figure, after all, these are not just some set of fools. They got something to offer. You talk about ownership, property, having your property and thing. I have a program that I wanted to get over to Joe Biden.
you were saying,
And it had a lot to offer, and it was going to draw the lower up to the middle. And we'd have a larger and better middle class.
you were saying,
Yeah, I think with all the leadership and educated people that we have in Lansing, and in regards to all these multiple, over 50-something churches, and with the leadership, if everybody could come together and establish a credit union, a nonprofit credit union, and circulate money, start buying up buildings and people that's going out of business, and the people that are non-black in our community, have asked them the 10% to donate to the community to help build this community up, and things of that nature. Just programs and a project to elevate and stop the crime and stop the murder and to stop the poverty, and I think there's something that everybody will get involved in, not only black people, but people outside, because the crime is affecting everybody.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to?
Don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God.